The future of the AlphaTauri Formula 1 team has been put under the spotlight ahead of the new season starting, with the radical suggestion the team could be moved to the UK. Rumours about AlphaTauri were circulating in F1 even before the death of Red Bull co-founder Mateschitz late last year. It was recently reported by German publication Automotor und Sport and confirmed by our sources that the new Red Bull management post-Mateschitz was weighing up what to do with its other team. The options included offloading it to cash in on how valuable an F1 team is these days, or even trying to keep the team under the Red Bull umbrella but relocate it to the UK to work even more closely with Red Bull Racing. AlphaTauri has now claimed it will not be sold. That could just be part of a wider play, but even if AlphaTauri's future is definitely under the Red Bull umbrella, nothing has been said to rule out a relocation, which is a much more controversial proposal for various reasons. F1 team values are at an all-time high due to a growth in popularity, the introduction of financial regulations making teams cheaper to run, and F1's commitment to a franchise model that seeks to limit the expansion of the grid and make it harder for new entries to join. So you can understand why selling AlphaTauri may have appealed to Red Bull. AlphaTauri is worth vastly more than it was for much of its recent history, let alone when Red Bull bought the Minardi team in 2005 to train drivers for Red Bull Racing. In the wake of Mateschitz' death, AlphaTauri team boss Franz Tost told us last November that his operations future was secure in the short and medium term. But it appears that the new Red Bull management are questioning whether AlphaTauri offers enough value in its current form. While Red Bull Racing has grown into one of F1's best and most successful teams, winning both titles last year, the second Red Bull team has never been more than a midfield runner. It initially ran as Toro Rosso but was rebranded in 2020 as AlphaTauri to promote the new Red Bull fashion brand. In the cost cap era, the benefit of owning two teams was meant to be that as Red Bull Racing spending decreased and prize money was more evenly distributed among teams, Red Bull would have two profitable entities, with AlphaTauri able to become more competitive. But AlphaTauri struggled in 2022, and despite launching the 2023 car around New York Fashion Week, the AlphaTauri brand appears to have made little impact globally in the fashion world. The suggestion is that the new management has also questioned why it has two teams that still operate so independently. AlphaTauri is based in Italy at the ex-Minardi headquarters in Faenza and has an aerodynamic department office in Bicester in the UK, where it also uses the Red Bull wind tunnel at Bedford. It does buy a certain number of parts from the main Red Bull F1 operation, but not as many as the rules allow. It's certainly not as dependent technically as, say, Haas is on Ferrari, and those are two completely separate entities. The reason for this is that AlphaTauri saves money building certain components that are cheaper to make than to buy all the Red Bull parts at the higher nominated fee mandated by the rules. It's intended to give AlphaTauri more room in its budget cap to try to be competitive, although that obviously didn't translate into a great 2022. And with Red Bull dominating both championships last year, you have to question the logic of AlphaTauri not taking better advantage of the rules. And if the team is not living up to either its sporting or commercial expectations, it would be easy for new management to question its purpose, or at least ask how it might be made more competitive. After the speculation that emerged during testing, Tost sought assurances from Oliver Mintzlaff, who is CEO of corporate projects and new investments at Red Bull. Tost said that in the very good meetings, Mintzlaff confirmed that the shareholders will not sell AlphaTauri and Red Bull will continue supporting the team in the future. Tost said the rumours have no foundation, but his statement didn't directly address the prospect of a relocation, only a sale. To be blunt, we can't be sure this isn't part of a wider play to make any interested parties have to pay more money if they did want to buy AlphaTauri, because if you're not seen as a motivated seller, you can try to command a higher price. But if a sale really isn't desired, then moving AlphaTauri to the UK seems logical from a business perspective. This was already seriously considered when Red Bull was doing the deal to acquire Minardi in the first place. But if it's logical, then why would running AlphaTauri from the UK be such a problem? Well, while this is speculative, the talk of moving can only make sense if it's to become part of the Red Bull campus in Milton Keynes. F1 may be big business today, but it remains first and foremost a sport, and there are compelling sporting reasons why it would be deeply problematic to have two separate teams owned by the same entity running out of the same base. Maybe it seems no more problematic than its current status, given it shares the Red Bull wind tunnel and utilises Red Bull parts. But the wind tunnel share was the consequence of the tight limits on both occupancy and usage, and is tightly regulated in much the same way as Haas's use of the Ferrari tunnel or Aston Martin's use of the Mercedes facility. Another potential similarity is that a design hub has been built for Haas in Maranello, but Haas is independently owned and pays a vast sum to Ferrari to use part of its base, so even that falls a long way short of what an AlphaTauri team based in Milton Keynes would likely be. According to the last accounts filed by Red Bull Racing up to the end of 2021, it only employs 52 people. Red Bull Technology is where most of the car design and building is done, with 721 employees. AlphaTauri would presumably adapt to the same model, with the racing team having a small headcount and much of the work done by Red Bull Technology. The first problem here relates to the cost cap. The question of how you correctly account for your activities and the potential for activities to be ascribed to non-cost cap areas and ancillary businesses has been a hot topic ever since the idea of putting a hard limit on spending was first discussed. This is a concern not exclusively about Red Bull, but any team that has multiple companies within its group, and relates to the risk of ancillary businesses and complex corporate structures in teams, making it difficult to know what is and isn't covered by the cost cap. A second team integrated into the Red Bull F1 campus would be a significant challenge from this perspective, especially with the competitive paranoia in F1, and there's no doubt that rival teams would do everything they could to stand in the way of this. The second problem is much more simple and relates to the potential for lost jobs, as well as the risk that an AlphaTauri subsumed into Milton Keynes would surely lose a big chunk of value, given it would become utterly dependent on Red Bull, which means there's also a business case against this happening. If AlphaTauri is definitely not being sold, that is a good thing, as it boosts the chances of the team staying where it is. The ex-Minardi team has been a part of Faenza for such a long time. Most of AlphaTauri is based on an unassuming industrial estate a few miles from the Imola circuit in Italy's answer to Britain's Motorsport Valley. The Minardi F1 building that Red Bull inherited is still in use, now housing marketing and associated operations along with the paint shop. It's not far from the newer facility that was built as part of re-establishing the team as a constructor in its own right after running customer Red Bulls for its first seasons from 2006 through 2009. AlphaTauri is only dependent on Red Bull for the use of the wind tunnel, the supply of engines, and the hydraulics, gearbox and rear suspension. It's grown steadily over the past dozen or so years, and the days when there was a hospitality unit sat in the car park housing a drawing office are long gone. And that should all make the option to simply keep running the team as it is quite attractive to Red Bull. With the cost cap in place and the more equitable distribution of the F1 revenue between the teams, it should be possible to structure the two teams so that they are at least cost neutral for Red Bull. In doing so, it would protect the jobs in Faenza and prevent selling the team to an entity that could be a threat to Red Bull Racing down the line. This team is also entering its 18th season under Red Bull ownership, so there is real history there, even if it was initially bought on something close to a whim. Keeping it and trying to grow it into something better would be in the spirit of what Mateschitz wanted, as his love of motorsport is what drove the creation of the Red Bull F1 empire. It would be a big decision for his successors to start to tear that apart. If you want to know more about why Red Bull's second F1 team is under so much pressure this season, check out this video in which we explored what the purpose actually is of AlphaTauri and why it must be better in 2023.